guess I'm a little humbled by my bio versus the rest of my esteemed colleagues on here. But, I think it's a really interesting topic, and, especially at a time where there's sort of seas or oceans of data, and we're moving from data to signals and what those signals mean, and connecting that to sports and fans and communities. I think each of you sort of has a pretty different way into that or lens to it. So I thought we'd just spend a moment quickly, and maybe maybe we'll start with George and work our way back toward me. But I think for your perspective, George, thinking about the NBA and growing league popularity and business in a region, what does that look like in terms of signals and reading those signals?
Absolutely. Hey, everybody. Thanks for being here. Thanks for the invite. So for the NBA, the starting point is to understand the path to fandom, what creates fans. And paths to fandom are not singular. They're very different. Some people become fans because they play the game of basketball, some others because they watch the game of basketball, some others because they want to belong to a community, and some others they love the cultural side of things. So understanding the steps of that journey and the various different journeys is really important to us in terms of how we generate new fans, nurture new fans, engage them, and at the end of the day, monetize them as well, deepen those relationships.
Great. Marc, I think from your end, thinking about helping agencies, advertisers sort of read those signals, data, tech, measurement, and more, from your perspective, just a quick note on the way in or lens to that.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's funny being here at Cannes. It's probably my 15th Cannes. And this festival has changed so much. My first time, this beach was actually a beach. You could see the sand. And over the last 15 years, it's just absolutely exploded in such a good way. And it's such a good metaphor of how the advertising industry has changed, how communications have changed over the last 15, 20, 25 years. There was a time where there were 3 television stations in the US, or 3 digital networks, AOL, MSN, and Yahoo, and you could do everything there. That's where you communicated. Then social media comes about, then connected TV and mobile, and now signals are so disparate. So being able to pull all of that back together and have a magnet or a thread to make some sense of all of that noise, to me, that's the idea of being able to take those signals and then somehow find a community to thread that through.
Love it. Joakim, I think interesting perspective for you, because you're very much about being on the ground in the communities and being able to sort of look people in the eye, but you're building passion and building the game through that. Tell us a little more about that from your perspective and the signals you might see.
First, I want to thank my family for being here. It's an honor to be here in Cannes. I got friends who came from all around. I was just in Soweto last night on a camp with kids. And for me, it's just about being able to connect with kids. And even though I haven't played on an NBA court in 10 years, it's about being able to share my experience and realizing that even though we're in Cannes right now, I was in Soweto yesterday, when I see these kids, it's like the look and the passion is the same. It's when I share my experience about basketball, they look up and they're so into it, and you realize that we're not so different. So I know it's not data, but that's my kind of data.
Yeah. Love it. Personal data. Ajit, we were talking a little bit even earlier just about thinking about connecting the funnel bottom up for seamless experiences and reading the signals to sort of win the middle and connect to conversion. And I think for maybe Lenovo, that might be a little bit more about gaming from a sporting perspective, but can you tell us a little bit more about that for you and what you're trying to accomplish and the signals that matter?
Yeah, first of all, thank you for having me on the panel as I slapped on water. Look, in many ways, last 10, 15 years, maybe longer, I think we've forgotten the art of marketing. We have gone to either building brands at the top or really worrying about trying to push the button on price to sell something. In the middle is where I think active consideration is built. That's where, if you're a sports fan, if you're a customer, if you're a brand, that's where you're really telling a story. And I think telling that story, in the case of sports as an example, in gaming, you appropriately mentioned gaming, it's about really finding what's important for that end user, that gamer. And it's not necessarily your machine or your technology, as an example. It's really their passion that Joakim was talking about, which is about, in this case, basketball or some other passion. You know, if you're a gamer, it's about connecting with somebody, trying to build that connection. So in marketing, I think we are trying to abstract to try and find out what that passion point is so that we can actually tell a story that is authentic, not overshadow the conversation, facilitate the conversation. So that's what we're trying to do. We are trying to figure out how to facilitate meaningful conversations.
Love it. Okay, well, we'll jump into sort of three themes here and things we've been talking about. The first one is off of that and your sort of unique lenses to it. Capturing speed and sort of the spread of the amount of signals that are out there. And thinking about that theme, Marc, how do you see brands connecting with sports communities so they can build sort of more brand advocates? I mean, you've talked a lot about communities as being the common thread across everybody here.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a great question in terms of how brands can get connected to communities and do it in an authentic sort of way. When I think about where we are right now, we're about 1 hour down the street from Monaco. And Monaco is known for a lot of great things, but F1 is one of those things. Show of hands, how many people watch F1 in here? That's a lot of people. How many people watched F1 before Netflix did The Drive to Survive? A bunch. So it's amazing because F1 is something that is so similar to what we do in advertising, to what we do in industry. There's speed, there's beauty, there's passion, and there's amazing content. You know, if you think about F1, there's fascinating content that brands have to integrate with or build, push out to their audiences, and then be a part of that community authentically. I mean, Ajit, Lenovo is a big F1 sponsor.
Thanks for the plug.
Absolutely, and this is the thing, and it makes sense because if you think about an F1 car, the drivers have like 0.2 seconds to react to 300 different sensors in their cars. Having a supercomputing platform on board and then a way to be have a super signal aggregator, take all of that information and then figure out what to do with it on a one-to-one basis. I mean, that's part of what we do. And to be integrated in a community on a massive scale or a one-to-one scale, I think that is what makes that authentic relationship.
It's 500 terabytes of data happens in one race. So that's the amount of data that's generated for one F1 race. It's crazy.
Wow.
It's amazing.
And being able to sort of demonstrate that to a consumer is sort of the challenge and bring it beyond the track. Ajit, I'll stay with you here for a second. Talking about speed and amount of data that's out there, I think it can be really daunting for a lot of clients and a lot of brands. Is there such a thing as too much data? And sort of how do you avoid the paralysis that can come with it and really get to the signals that matter?
There is such a thing called too much data because I think what has happened in the last 10 years, and part of the problem we have is I think people are spending way too much time looking at data and not paying enough attention to what actually is happening with consumers. See, the problem is it is very complex, the data landscape, and people can draw 1,000 conclusions. And I think that we are all concluding on things that biases allow us to conclude on. And it happens even with my team. They see what they want to see. And unfortunately, in that process, you short-circuit the experience quite a bit. So you have to be careful not to just be data-driven. You have to really understand other broader signals. Yeah. You have to look at the brand. You have to look at what's happening with conversion. But you also have to see what the sentiment is, awareness, in the, what's happening in social. So you got to have a very multifaceted, broad approach to understanding data, rather than just looking at spreadsheets and saying, did my conversion go up? Did it go down? I think we can't be myopic with data. We have to be careful to balance data with proper insights.
Great. Joakim, I think off of that, right, as somebody we mentioned connecting and being on the ground with people and seeing their faces, sort of how do you identify emotional signals and real life communities that data might miss? That Ajit is saying, hey, we miss stuff all the time when there's too much data.
Yeah, I think for me, I'm a third generation athlete. My grandfather was a soccer player. My father was a tennis player.
Awesome tennis player.
He was not bad. A French player who won a Grand Slam, the only African player to ever win a Grand Slam. And I grew up around that kind of education. The difference is, you know, a kid from Africa can look through social media and see Stephen Curry work out, see a kid from the Chicago Bulls work out, somebody and be inspired by the way that he works and say, okay, this is how Stephen Curry works out. Okay, I can do that now when I go and replicate. So that is the power of the data. That is the power of social media. But at the end of the day, you have to implicate and you have to put in the work.
George, maybe you could talk a little bit about aggregating all the signals and what you're looking at when you're trying to do that with NBA and in the universe and sort of growing in the region.
Absolutely. I mean, you gave a really good example about F1. The best IPs transcend their core business. F1 did that very well with Drive to Survive. The NBA has been doing that for decades. So obviously the best basketball league in the world, but also a brand that crosses over into culture, music, fashion, sneakers, entertainment, you name it. And by doing so, we build a brand that's not just global, but it's relevant to many people outside the core sport audience. When we look at what we've built globally and then we look at Europe in particular, we see a huge disconnect. In Europe, basketball is by far the second biggest sport in terms of followers, close to 300 million. Trails only football, but then the ability of the European basketball leagues and brands to engage that fan base is very limited. And that's because primarily they've built a product for hardcore fans. So we see a great opportunity there for the NBA to bring the know-how from a global standpoint into Europe, but in a very authentic and native way, and try and elevate the sport across the ecosystem on the continent in the best possible way.
Great, thank you. I think our second theme sort of moves from the signals and all the data that sort of feeds into those signals to more about understanding how tech, content, and context can be used to sort of follow across the journey to screens and moments. So more the decoding across all the screens aspect of the talk. So I think with that, Joakim, now that you've stepped back from playing basketball, how do you engage fans who may never set foot in a stadium but live on social media and digital platforms as you do it? How do you sort of bring that experience to them that they wouldn't have otherwise?
Just try to spend as much time with them. You know, you realize when you're done playing, all you have is your relationships and your memories. So I try to share my story, share my experiences. You know, my story was not all about, there was ups and downs, and it's how you navigate, you know, a big loss, how you navigate a win, and just being able to have that connection. And you realize that wherever you are, the game it's a global game, but those feelings, those emotions that you have are the same wherever you go.
Love it. I have a pretty good hook shot, so if you want to play later, I might.
You don't want those problems.
Yeah.
Defensive player of the year.
Ajit, how does tech act as sort of a bridge between the fans' passion, which you've talked a lot about, and the brand trying to connect with them?
Look, I mean, you can do 1,000 things, but I'll tell you what we do. One of the things that we started was building a community. I mean, to Joakim's point, building communities in the real world is a lot more difficult than doing it online because you can scale it much faster. So we started with like nobody, and today we have like, I don't know, 5 million people or whatever the number is. But the point is, online communities during COVID especially became a thing because people were not able to go out. And what you realize that every brand today that wants to have a real relationship and real conversation has to facilitate a forum where their customers, fans, prospects, whoever, can have a conversation about something that is important to them. Could be about mental health as an example for Gen Zs, or it could be about something else. But the point is, we as people who have access to technology and platforms, can we help further that conversation knowing that that's important for our customers? So,
yeah. Great. George, new league in Europe, you have a chance to build something, right? And I think that's always an amazing opportunity because you can look around and say, I want to do it differently or I want to do it better and here's how. So how do you build a better experience for the fans in Europe using some of these signals, but in digital environments?
I mean, we're super excited to be at this very advanced exploration stage about launching this new Pan-European League. I'll give you two examples about how we're thinking about this product. So on the one end, and I spoke a little bit about it before, we want a product that transcends the sport. So we want to augment that reach and be very relevant to audiences that are not hardcore basketball fans. And that has merchandising and product components. It has storytelling through content. It has engagement through the stream. So in a digital way, you can imagine a stream that is the main one for those who are hardcore basketball fans. And another stream where the people speaking are lifestyle influencers and they talk about anything else but the game that's happening, right? For a different type of audience. And a third one that is for gamers, and so on and so forth. So we want to build that augmented product, that augmented reach. That's on the one end. On the other, right now, what we see in Europe is that the regional leagues over-index in countries like my home country of Greece, where you have tremendous passion and affinity, but on the other, not necessarily as much of a commercial appeal, like some other countries and cities, especially in Western Europe. So in our thinking, it's a model that has franchise teams based out of primarily big European cities like London, like Manchester, like Paris, like Rome, like Berlin, coupled with cities from East and Southeast Europe where basketball is really a religion and there is a lot of passionate fan bases there, and present that hybrid balanced view to the fan.
Great. Marc, from your perspective, considerations for brands that they need to have when advertising against sort of live events, because we haven't necessarily talked specifically about live events in this, but what are those considerations brands should take into account to make sure they're making the most of it?
Yeah, it's interesting. Live events have always been the way that sports has been consumed. That's the primary way because it's fresh, it can change, it's dynamic. But over the last couple of years, what's really happened is you've got this pinnacle, this broadcast, and then you have this layer beneath it with all these social influencers. I mean, if you go and look at Reddit or YouTube or TikTok, and are following a Bulls game or something like that, you're going to have hundreds of conversations ongoing at that time. For brands, it used to be, how can I live in the broadcast? But now it's not only how can I live in the broadcast, but how can I connect in each one of those influencers' streams? And each one is a little bit different. So you can't have the same messaging in a Reddit chat as you can with a TikTok influencer or different TikTok influencers. I mean, context matters. It's funny. We're here in Cannes having a conversation around things like communities and data and all these things. Can you imagine any other time of the year having a conversation about data and like AI on a beach in Cannes? No. But the fact that all of us are here in this industry, the context makes sense. So context really makes a difference. And if your content doesn't align with context, the community will throw you out. Yeah. And I think that's the thing. It's these relationships, they're one-to-one, they're real human, and they're fragile, and you need to be able to bring value to those community users.
Yeah, I would argue context is king. So third and final theme within this, activating community, culture, and local context to move from engagement to loyalty. So thinking about that as sort of third and final theme, Joakim, as someone who travels the world, builds community offline, how do global audiences express fandom differently? And what does that teach us about where and how brands should show up?
Bob Marley's my favorite artist. And he has a song, and there's a moment he said, "Who feels it knows it." And I think that makes a lot of sense. Like when you see somebody who has a social media platform, and he goes to a playground, and he takes a kid, and he's like, "Have you ever been to an arena before?" And the kid says, "No, I've never been to an arena before." And then he's filming the kid walking into the arena for the first time. And you get his reaction, and you get all those emotions. Because imagine for that kid, it might not be comfortable to be being filmed in that moment. But to be able to capture that and to inspire a kid who's never been into an arena, that's how you get more fans. So it's about being as authentic as possible and being able to use those platforms to be able to inspire all around the world.
That's amazing. I think just hearing you talk about it makes us feel it a bit, so thank you. I guess this one's for George and Joakim. From the NBA in Africa to Europe and the Middle East, what does it take to build fan connection across borders, cultures, and context? How will the NBA continue to build these connections as the league expands globally? And I think that's tricky, right? Like, expansion can often water things down versus make them better. How do you play that through?
I can go first. It's super tricky, and the league spends a lot of time on that balance. How can you be a global brand, but then a brand that resonates locally in an authentic way? And we have a three-pronged strategy, three different ways of doing so. First of all, it starts with the young generations, the kids, and how you can facilitate their relationship with the game of basketball. So we spend a ton of time and resources to develop grassroots programs, participation programs, under the umbrella of the Junior NBA for young boys and girls to learn the secrets of basketball. And then, that gets bigger and goes and extends to referees, to coaches. So the whole player or participation ecosystem, that's part A. Part B is about the content. And the league made the decision decades ago almost to allow the content to be available on social media, not just through our own channels, but also through creators. And we do that to offer that reach and that accessibility. When I was growing up in Greece, there was no way to watch an NBA game, right? And obviously we've changed that to the better, but also through a local lens, which might be in some cases that the delivery is on the local language side of things, or maybe we focus on local heroes, like Wemby in France, et cetera, et cetera. And then the third part, the more scarce asset, the more unique experience, in hearing Joakim talk about walking into the arena, made me think about it too, is our live games. That's the top of the pyramid, that's the crown jewel, so we try and bring our live games, our top asset in as many countries around the world as possible.
Joakim, anything to add on that front?
No, I think it's just about investing in authentic.
Yeah.
I think that's the most important thing. We can talk about data. I think all those things are very important. It makes us understand what's important, but at the end of the day, it's investing in people who can touch on the next generation. And we come from a lot of different places, but with a brand like the NBA, when you say NBA, I don't care if you're in India, wherever you are in Europe or in Africa, that is a powerful brand that a lot of people want to be a part of.
All right, I think we're probably on the last question here. Marc, just talk to me a little bit, or talk to us a little bit about brands looking at different signals to understand how to connect with global audiences, but global audiences across geographies and cultures and conversations. Like, how do you get into that?
It's funny. I think that my distinguished panelists covered off on a lot of that, where having a magnet, a draw that stitches people together, but then realizing that each region is going to interpret things differently. The people's experiences, like you said, someone who's never been on the court is going to interpret things very differently than someone who's been in Madison Square Garden, 100 times. So the need is to be able to have that global platform, but then to interpret it locally very differently, to interpret it to the influencers locally, and to have people like Joakim and others who can actually be out there to influence in person in an authentic manner, because that's really what's going to move emotions and help move this forward.
Great. Okay, I think we are right on time. Thank you all. Really appreciate the conversation and all the passion around it and the different lens that each of you brought. Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers all.
Thank you.